Sup, ladies and gentlemen, Accolonn here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you. We're back once again with our coverage of interviews. More interviews are coming out literally at this point almost every single day. It really is. This is the biggest media push I think Blizzard have ever had. We had a media push just after the announcement for Dragonflight, and now with the alpha going live, there's another media push. In the past, we would usually have these media pushes usually closer to launch. Blizzard would do massive media pushes. Then in between, they would sort of talk to, the mainstream media, the gaming media and so forth. But this time around, they really do seem to be doing the tour. They're meeting with almost every single content creator that is a part of Blizzard, answering questions, sometimes answering the same questions. So that's why my feedback or my coverage of this will be a little bit curated. I'm not going to give you everything that was in the interview. I'm only going to touch on the things that is really interesting. This time it was with Morgan Day. We've covered the previous interviews done with Ian Hazikostas, but there is a number of really interesting things that came out of this, and I'm really excited with everything that's been discussed here. Remember, you can be one of the cool people on the screen right now by simply clicking the links in the description down below, heading over to Patreon and becoming a patron, or join us live over on Twitch. Links to all of that in the description down below. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, let's jump into it. So, of course, as we covered with Ian and Ian's interview where he spoke about group loot being a returning feature to World of Warcraft, I said that this is, in my opinion, a very good middle ground, where it's not master loot. So for a lot of people that do get screwed over by, greedy dungeon masters and just greedy officers and things that basically give all the loot to themselves, or every single person have been in a position where the girlfriend of the GM gets a piece of loot or the boyfriend of the GM gets a piece of loot that they do not deserve, but, they do favors for the other person, and therefore they get the loot over you. It sucks. It feels truly miserable. And I thought group loot was a good compromise. It gives guilds a lot of control over who gets what pieces of loot. A loot council can still decide who gets to roll and who doesn't, but it's not necessarily master loot. Turns out, no, master loot is still in the discussion, but it is going to be a discussion that really is going to happen with the player base. So they want to know if group loot, I think, this is my opinion, I might be wrong on this, let me know in the comments what you think, by the way, of master loot versus group loot versus personal loot. I'd love to read your thoughts there, but I think they're gonna release group loot and see if the calls for master loot continues. Maybe group loot solves all the issues and people just stop calling for master loot altogether, once they get to play around with it, because they realize we have all the control we need now over gear. We don't have to worry about personal loot anymore. And then if those calls do get silenced, master loot is off the table. If they don't, they can put master loot in. But there's going to be a lot of control discussions that needs to happen around master loot, because personally, I am a fan of master loot. I think master loot really works well when it works well, and that really is the issue. It doesn't always work well, so it has to be something that people are very aware of and that people can opt in or out of, depending, on what their takes or their stance on this may be. So that was sort of the first thing that they discussed. The next topic that I wanted to quickly cover here has to do with the talent trees, but then also the raid buff. So they asked two questions. I'm going to condense it into one sort of topic here. First, on the side of the raid buffs and the party buffs, Blizzard is just doing everything here, and according to Morgan Day, they're going to continuously do everything, but as players, we should not get too excited or too invested in all of the group buffs and the party buffs and things like that is being announced right now. Morgan Day said that right now they're rushing towards the line, so they're trying to put as many group and party buffs into the game and personal buffs into the game as humanly possible to find where the line is. Like, where is the line where you go overboard? And Morgan Day made mention of TBC. So in TBC, for those of you that played during that time, you will know if you were a class that happened to need something like Wind Fury, for example, but the melee group were full, you were screwed, right? Because without Wind Fury buff, you were just not doing damage, not compared to everyone else that were in the Wind Fury groups. So they're sort of trying to find that line, because in Wrath of the Lich King, they scaled that back severely. Like, there was a massive scale back. This time around, they're sort of going, all right, let's see where that line is. And then once we're brushing up against that line, we can always pull back and we can say, okay, wait, this is too many buffs. Let's pull this back. Personally, I'm a huge fan of party buffs, of group buffs. I think they bring a lot of character to the game, but I also have, like, a dislike to it. So it's really a love-hate relationship, you know, because on the one hand, yes, a lot of personal stuff and personal sort of play experience that is brought by buffs, but if your class isn't one of the classes that brings a very important buff, then you almost feel useless, because you will be replaced by another class that brings the buff that you or that the group requires. A good example of this would be something like increased magic damage. It used to be something that warlocks would do through Curse of Elements. Nowadays, it's of course demon hunters that do this instead, and you know, there's an argument to be made that if a class doesn't bring a buff, is that class going to see any playstyle or playtime, unless, of course, they're completely overpowered. So there are potential downsides to it. But again, all in all, I like their approach. This is what alpha is for. Do everything, go completely overboard, and then dial it back. So use beta as your opportunity to now dial back and get to sort of a nice spot with it. Then they spoke on talents. They actually spent most of the interview talking about talents, and the talent discussion was interesting. Morgan Day, in his explanation for what they're doing with talents right now, a lot of focus is being put on the natural flow of talents and the idea of diversity, the idea of being able to build the way that you want to build, giving you the freedom to play the game that you want to play. And here's where a lot of you will immediately go, Accolonn, but cookie cutter. And I want to tell you, I used to think the same thing, and then I remembered a bit of research I saw about a year ago. There's a study that was done about gaming, and they were specifically looking at the number of gamers that spend time in online forums. So the number of people that play video games, but then also go to forums, be that Reddit, be that official forums, be that YouTube, basically anywhere where the community meets that isn't within the game. And the specific focus for this was obviously to figure out if you only pay attention to social media, do you get a decent representation of what the player base actually wants and what the player base actually needs? And the answer was yes, because about 30% of all players in video games will leave the game world in order to spend time on things related to the world. About 30%. Of that 30%, though, it's less than 10% that actually post things on forums. So official Reddit or official forums and Reddit forums, only about 10% of the entire player base, of 30% of the player base, right, will actually post things. The rest are just there to read. They're just sort of looking. They're just sort of keeping an eye. And this made me think, well, do we know if cookie cutter is as big of a deal in World of Warcraft as we think it is? What about the thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of players that only play with their friends? So whenever they're doing a Mythic Plus, they're not running Raider.io, they're not logging anything, they're just playing with their friends. They never go on forums, they have no idea what the class discords are, they don't know what the cookie cutter builds are. They just build whatever is fun and whatever they think is fun, and then they go do some Mythic Plus. And I realized if 70% of World of Warcraft's player base never spend time on forums, it is a decent bet. Now, for World of Warcraft, the numbers could be skewed. So it could be that, well, actually 90% of World of Warcraft players go on the forums and know, and this invalidates everything I just said here. But there is a reasonable chance that a very large chunk of a very silent majority of World of Warcraft players will have a lot of choice and diversity within these talent trees, because they're not going to know that there's such a thing as a cookie cutter build. They're not going to know that they're doing anything wrong because they're only playing with their friends. You know, they have a guild, and they and their guild have raided together for 10 years now, and they all just do whatever they think is the necessary thing to do, and they're just having their fun, you know, doing their normal. And really, that's who the game should be designed for. For the people that's going to do cookie cutter, they're going to do cookie cutter regardless, right? Whether you have all the choice or no choice, doesn't matter. They're going to do the cookie cutter thing. Final Fantasy is a game with no talents, and yet the rotation in Final Fantasy is cookie cutter. The people that play Final Fantasy and that do it at a very high level all have the exact same rotation. So even if you give people no options in how they want to power their class, the cookie cutter people are still going to do the cookie cutter things. So perhaps it's a good thing that the game is being designed for that silent majority. The player base that will never see this video because they don't even watch they don't even watch videos about YouTube, or on YouTube about World of Warcraft, but still, you know, it is for them. And I also think, even for cookie cutter players, the talent trees, as Morgan Day explained here, the reason they split the talent trees between a spec and a class talent tree was exactly because they wanted to ensure that there would always be a certain level of personality within every single tree. So maybe there is going to be cookie cutter builds for the spec trees, but when it comes to the class tree, a lot of that is going to be down to your own playstyle. Are you gonna want to use Burning Rush as a warlock, or would you rather use your demonic gateway, right? And maybe Burning Rush you don't like because it takes too much health, or whatever the case might be. Do you want to use an empowered soulstone, or is a normal soulstone fine for you? Things like this is going to be your choice in how you want to play the game. And even there, it's still a personalized thing. It's something that you're doing for yourself, and that is a good thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're doing. They did sort of say that people need to be careful to read too much into these talent trees. This is alpha. This is their first pass on these talent trees. And a big thing that is coming will be rebalancing, reshuffling, removing things around. And right now they are very, very cognizant of this idea of what happens if you go into a Mythic Plus. This is the example that they used, and you have a rogue that didn't take kick. That's a fuck up, right? So they are looking at ways to kind of alleviate that, to kind of ensure that if you are a rogue, you will almost definitely have taken some form of an interrupt. Now, this could look different, right? Depending on what it is. You could always just move that to class only thing, so every rogue does have kick. Some might have an empowered kick, others will have just a normal kick, whatever the case might be. We'll have to wait and see exactly how this plays out. They then spoke very briefly on the AP grind, and more specifically artifact power grinds, or any grind really, and they like AP grinds, not Blizzard, the starting quest. They love AP grinds. I, of course, or the starting zone, excuse me. I do not like AP grinds. I find them incredibly boring. But they wanted to know, what else are you going to be able to do as a max level player in World of Warcraft if you don't have a raid going on? What is there going to be for you to do? And Morgan sort of said this and explained this, and it was very clear that they did not catch on to what he was saying. And I think a lot of people would miss it if they weren't paying attention very closely to what is said there. And I know, because I've had experiences with these interview type style things where you have a set amount of time, a set amount of questions. So you're basically, whenever you ask your question, you're spending a lot more time just sort of focused on the next question and how to finish this, because you only have X amount of time. So you're not spending as much time listening to the person and the answers that they're actually providing you. I, of course, didn't have to worry about that. I was just watching because I wanted to know the answers. But okay, so in terms of what their ultimate goal is, Blizzard is going back to their roots, back to their fundamental foundations in World of Warcraft. Their initial hope for the launch of for Dragonflight is that Professions will be so good that it will be an endgame system alongside PvP dungeons and raids. So it is going to be its own endgame system. That already fills me with a lot of joy, because professions have been forgotten for so long in World of Warcraft, and it would be nice if you could spend an entire evening doing professions and actually feel like you're progressing and not just mindlessly farming stuff out in the open world. So it's going to be really cool to see how Blizzard is approaching this. But then Morgan Day made mention of something that I think is even cooler, and that is, this is only the start. The focus for Dragonflight, and the launch really of Dragonflight, was to make sure that all the foundations are laid out correctly so that they can build upon it. And he did sort of mention that in future expansions, but also in future patches, this idea of adding things over time to the game for players to do. So professions are going to send you out into the open world to go do things in the open world that isn't just going to be farming, but you're going to have to do these things in order to get some profession stuff, in order to actually craft stuff, right? And the open world is going to be another very big part of what they're focusing on right now. But then Ian, in an interview, also said that, with Towley, actually, Ian said they are looking currently at they might bring back something like Torghast or the Mage Tower in one of the subsequent patches. And then yesterday, during Ian's interview that we covered actually on the channel, Ian said that they're looking for Dragonflight at more frequent but variable size patches. So they're not going to be worried by releasing 2 or 3 patches in very short succession of one another, but they're much smaller in size, and only then the 4th patch is like a really large patch that adds, the new story and the new dungeons or raids or anything like that. They're going to release stuff as and when it's good and ready, and they want to fill up the game with as much stuff for people to do that is just available to be done if you choose to. So I'm looking forward to the patch where Blizzard goes, right, we've reimagined what Torghast could ultimately look like as a deep dungeon, a true deep dungeon experience in World of Warcraft, and we're now releasing it as a true deep dungeon experience. Head over and go do Torghast if you so choose. I think that's going to be really cool, and of course there's going to be dragon riding and racing and all the rest of it. Last question that really stood out to me, and I'm going to sort of again merge a few questions here into one. Mega dungeons, they love mega dungeons, but they are looking at sort of a renewed stance on mega dungeons, really, where they really want to try and figure out how to keep gear in mega dungeons relevant for longer. So give mega dungeons an actual reason for existing, but they love the idea of having these larger 5-man raids almost in the game. And I could very easily, if I could throw my hat in the ring here for a possible feature, what if you did something for mega dungeons as Mythic Plus did for normal dungeons? What if you tried to do something like that, where mega dungeons becomes a system and feature in its own right that maybe builds its own player base? I know a lot of people say, well, mega dungeons are already Mythic Plus, but what we're talking about here is, how about you made all the mega dungeons in World of Warcraft available all the time, but change them over time to always keep them fresh and have them be their own thing, so to speak. And then finally spoke a little bit about gear, and for this, all you need to know is that they are bringing back the Creation Catalyst, only now they're looking at timing. They know that they should have released it sooner, so they're probably going to have something akin to the Creation Catalyst a lot earlier, and it seems like they're not sure whether professions will play a very, very reasonable part of the Creation Catalyst, or if the Creation Catalyst will work basically the same way it does right now in Shadowlands, but it is coming back. And for PvP and PvE, PvP gear is going to have 2 item levels, 1 PvE item level and 1 PvP item level, where as soon as you create it, it immediately becomes like the best PvP gear that you can get within that tier category, but you can upgrade the PvE component of it over time in order to make yourself stronger in the open world for when you do venture into the open world as a PvPer. So really cool stuff coming out of this interview. I really enjoyed the interview. We will have a link in the description down below if you want to watch the entirety of the interview. Hit the like button if you enjoyed my coverage of this, if you're excited for Dragonflight, or if you just want to hit the like button. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, you can be one of the cool people on the screen right now by simply clicking the links in the description down below, becoming a patron, a YouTube member, or a Twitch sub. Your support is always very, very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, be good to each other. I will see all of you in the next one. Peace out, fam.